Thanks for joining me today. Chris and Emma did a great job to set the stage, so good work. And if you haven't joined their network, I highly recommend it. I joined it, I don't know, very early on, and it has helped me so much with creating this scope of work for Nantucket's Strategic Retreat and Relocation Program. And to my knowledge, Nantucket is the first community, coastal community, starting to develop a plan. Okay, so I'm going to get into the background and context of this. If you don't already know, the town of Nantucket has a coastal resilience plan that we started developing back in 2020. And from that plan, one of the high recommendations was to create a retreat and relocation program. There's a lot on the screen, so I'll walk you through it. Coastal resiliency really started getting the ball rolling back in 2019 with the hazard mitigation plan. And so from that plan, the community came together, and the top two priorities were to create a coastal resilience plan and to hire a coastal resilience czar, which became my position as the coastal resilience coordinator. We did a risk assessment, so anecdotally we knew areas flooded and areas eroded, but at what time horizons and what are the damages and losses if we take no action? So that was very humbling. If we take no action from 2020 out to 2070, the damages and losses we as the town and private properties can expect are $3.4 billion. That's in 2020 dollars, so it's a lot more today. And then we also started a localized erosion monitoring program. Nantucket has one of the highest erosion rates in Massachusetts, but we wanted to know, okay, at this beach, what is the erosion rate over time? How many feet of coastal bank did we lose during this storm event, et cetera. Then the plan was adopted in early 2022. We also have about 23 out of the 40 recommendations either underway, implemented, or ongoing. So we are here today for the Retreat and Relocation Program. And that program is looking at tidal flooding as one of our coastal hazards. So this is our downtown area. This is Easy Street. It is the only way to get to the Steamship Authority, which is our lifeline, and to the remainder of the downtown area. And this, I believe last year, this flooded 75 times. So we've got big problems there. Out of the Coastal Resilience Plan, this is a map showing tidal flooding for different time horizons. And then how I had said for the risk assessment, we really looked at, okay, what is the number of structures that could potentially be exposed for 20, 30, 50, 70, 100? What are the miles of roadways, and how many acres of protected space is at risk too? This is also taking into consideration coastal storm surge flooding. Again, this is another map from the CRP, and as the time horizon goes on, obviously more areas are at risk. And then also coastal erosion. Again, from the Coastal Resilience Plan, our south and east shore have really high rates of erosion. Our north shore also erodes, but not as fast. And then our island is more than 50% in conservation land. So that is wonderful ecologically, but when we're talking about retreat and relocation, it really adds a strain on where can these structures or roadways be moved to. And then if you noticed in this one, there's a lot of pink in the middle of the island. When we go to the elevations of the island, our highest elevation is in the middle of the island. That is conservation land. So Nantucket has a deep history in retreat and relocation, right? Thinking we're a little spit of land in the Atlantic. Sandbars are always shifting. And so this is a picture of the Dreamland Theater back in the early 1900s. It's actually being floated across the harbor to where it is located downtown today. I couldn't find a picture, but we've heard from some private property owners that there was an area in our downtown along Washington Street, and there were these little fish shacks, and they were actually on skids. And during the summer, they would move them down to the water when it was nice and calm, and during the winter, they would move them to higher ground because of the storms. We've also had a lighthouse that was moved. So the Sankaty Trust or the Sconset Trust moved this lighthouse back in 2007. It cost them about $4 million then. And I believe it's on Modern Marvels. If anybody watches that, you can see how they actually moved this lighthouse back 400 feet from the coastal bank because of erosion. And today, it is not out of the ordinary to see pieces or homes driven down the road. And so that's to either, we also have a lot of structures that are being elevated in place or retreated back from their property or relocated, away from these coastal hazards. Today, as far as infrastructure goes, the town has relocated Sheep Pond Road. It is planning for alternative access to Baxter Road. And then our sewer treatment facility, a couple years ago, we had all these crazy southwest storms during the winter, and the bank, or the dune in front of the sewer treatment facility lost about 100 feet. And this bed here, it's kind of hard to see, but we're actually filling it in this picture. And so that bed's filled in, and then the next 3 will be filled in as well. I did get a CZM grant this year to start planning and come up with conceptual designs for dune resiliency here. Moving the wastewater treatment facility isn't really an option, so we're looking at what short-term things can we do here to adapt, and then long-term, can we retreat any of the discharge beds elsewhere on the property? Okay, so getting into the actual program. This is our project team. Scape is our consultants, and then we have sub-consultants Arcadis, HR&A, and Noble Wickersham and Hart. So the process today is really a case-by-case kind of emergency basis. It's hard for property owners to follow, to figure out what department do you go to first, what are even the options. It requires a lot of reviews. It's not very streamlined at all. The moving routes, so actually moving the structures down our historic streets that are super narrow. There are only, specific areas, roadways that you can use. You also have to think about, which I just learned about, are the trees and the limbs, and you can't just cut off limbs to get the structure through. If it's a private tree, you need to go speak to that person. If it's a town tree, the town arborist will say, yes, you can cut that, or no, you cannot. There's power lines, there's all these logistics. A lot of areas too, if there's a bridge, then you can't move the structure over the bridge because there's a weight limit. So a lot of things to consider. So the whole purpose of this strategic retreat and relocation program is to establish a proactive, instead of reactive, is what we're doing today, for addressing increasing coastal risk on the island, where erosion, sea level rise, and storm impacts are reshaping long-term conditions across the island. The town has invested on resilience efforts to strengthen many areas, but in some places, that's not feasible anymore. So, that's including moving structures, infrastructure, public facilities, adjusting land use, or guiding future development away from these high-risk areas. The program supports a broader conversation about how to respond, building a shared understanding of risk and informing more proactive long-term decisions. And with that, we have 5 core program goals. So the first one is to develop an island-wide strategic retreat and relocation program that identifies those areas at risk where we can't do structural, non-structural, or nature-based strategies anymore, and then having pathways for long-term adaptation. Establish implementable, equitable, and legally viable actions that can be supported by community members, town staff, elected officials, and partner agencies. So on Nantucket, we have 6 census blocks, so we really are aware of that equitable piece. We want to honor Nantucket's historic culture and environmental character. The island is also a historic landmark, and there's particular areas on the island that are historic districts as well. So keeping all those in mind to shape retreat and relocation strategies that respect the island's conserved unique landscapes, built heritage, and sense of place while planning proactively for future climate conditions. And then to build directly on the Coastal Resilience Plan and all the other town plans that are there to make sure that it's not, counteracting any plan that's already in place, and it's just building on those. And then the most important part is to develop a robust, transparent community engagement education strategy that informs and engages year-round and seasonal residents, property owners, and other stakeholders throughout the planning process. So we are in the box to the left. We're early on, we just started in January. We've already set the goals. We are analyzing existing and future conditions, and then starting to determine triggers. So Kristen had mentioned this. At what point do we need these, structures or roadways or whatever to be retreated or relocated? So right now it's emergency basis, it's the house is falling off the coastal bank. We don't want that to continue to happen, because then you have stuff all over the beach. There's pipes, and those offer hazards as well. So that'll be our next task, is to try to develop those trigger points. And then in the middle, develop, identify rehabilitation and relocation opportunities. So are there properties that are very close to the downtown that get flooded quite often? Do those people want to move out? Do they want to sell their property so that we can have public access to the water or something like that? We want to evaluate the rehabilitation, relocation options, and then prioritize where those should be around the island. And then to the right, creating a roadmap, like I'd mentioned, really developing that final plan, and then recommending policy updates, and really looking at our policies to see, okay, is this commission and this commission's regulations, are they actually counteracting each other, or are they impeding on allowing people to proactively retreat and relocate? We also want to create a more streamlined permitting or forms for the public to be able to figure out how to actually do this proactively and not wait until it's an emergency, and then recommend areas for land swaps, transfer of development rights, like the whole suite of tools in the toolbox. So the program is absolutely voluntary, or will be absolutely voluntary, a planning effort. It's not a mandate. It's a tool to support informed voluntary decision-making, a way to understand risk in future scenarios, a space for community input and shared discussion, a framework to identify potential receiving areas, and a process to explore options for planned retreat and strategic relocation. It's not mandatory. It's not forcing property owners to move. It's not ignoring historical buildings. It's not immediate actions or implementation. It's not reactive. It's not removing property rights, and it's not ignoring other resilient adaptation strategies. Like a lot of towns on the Cape, Nantucket is extremely seasonal. And this is a cool graph showing, so the navy blue is about our permanent residents population. And then you can see in the summer months when hurricanes, when it's hurricane season, those populations really expand. So in August, we can have, upwards of 60,000 or more people on the island. And then in the winter, when the populations are low, then we have a lot of nor'easters. And generally, that's the time when we're seeing a lot of erosion and a lot of flooding. So lots of stakeholders. Again, it's an interesting balance between getting all of the input, especially in a seasonal community when we know that it floods a lot, but those people actually aren't on island to visually see it. So we've come up with a big plan for engagement, both in person and virtual, to get everyone's input. As far as next steps, we're in the establishing goals, triggers, and geographies section. We actually have a virtual open house in a couple days. And then we'll have an in-person public workshop in the summer. That's when we have the highest amount of people on island. And then in the fall, there'll be another virtual open house to be able to accommodate people that are off island. And that's when we'll share, the actual roadmap and the program and the final plan. So the virtual workshop is on Thursday. If anybody wants to attend, please do. You can hit the QR code. It'll be a more in-depth presentation than what I gave today, because it'll be a full hour and a half. There'll be breakout sessions and really interactive questions throughout the whole presentation too. So in that, we just want to introduce the program and start developing the words to use for this program, right? So we had to use something, so we're using strategic retreat and relocation, but is that terminology what Nantucket wants to use to call this? So come to the event. It'll also be recorded, so if you can't make it, you can go to the project's website and watch it there too. Okay, I think I made it. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you.
Hi. You mentioned earlier that relocating the wastewater treatment facility isn't feasible or viable. I'm wondering why that determination was made and if there was like a cost-benefit analysis or if it's just a lack of siting availability, anything like that.
Lack of land, and we haven't done a cost-benefit analysis or feasibility assessment on that, but with the price of property on the island, it would be an enormous amount of money.
I'm curious with this planning, kind of the relative emphasis on public versus private properties. Is the plan intended to focus more on some of those public entities, or how do you integrate, planning for the private homes in those lands? Yeah, so it's both. We need to plan for our public infrastructure, obviously, but for the private properties, it's creating really more like transparent procedures, and if they want to relocate their house, how do they actually do that? So that's like the private piece.
No, mine? Oh. Anyone have another question? Up at the front, I see a hand.
Fellow Nantucketers. Hi.
Leah, again, my name's Rick Atherton, Nantucket. Welcome to the coastal conservative we are. Back to the wastewater treatment facility. Falmouth, as I understand, is entertaining an outflow pipe. I'm not sure that's accurate. It was reported in the paper. And it would seem to me that would be appropriate for the planning effort in Nantucket. Are you aware that is the town undertaking a study to get into that? It might avoid dealing with all those pits in front of the between the plant and the water. So thank you.
Yeah, so all I know about that is our wastewater treatment facility director, he had mentioned to me that there was a discussion with DEP that Nantucket could potentially be able to, or I guess qualify for something like that. I don't know to what extent that has moved forward or not, or what the time frame is for any of that, but he did briefly mention that.
Any other questions?
Hi, I was just wondering if you've gotten any community reaction so far to this in terms of it being also, voluntary. Like, are you getting good support from the community? And also specifically, because you were talking about the history of Nantucket in a way has had to deal with this in the past. Do you think that that's going to help going forward because it's part of the flavor of being there?
Yeah, so as far as the community piece of it, we'll find out on Thursday. Because it's our first virtual open house. We've had stakeholder meetings more like with town departments. But as far as the public, yeah, we'll find out more on Thursday. We're also going to have a survey that goes out too. And I'm hopeful that because we've been doing this for generations and generations, that it will not be as hard to, one, have the conversation, but two, like, implement it. But you never know.
Okay, we are at time,
All right.
so please
Thank
thank
you.
Leah, Emma, and Kristen one last time.